All the Young Dudes by MsKingBean89, Chapter 119, 7th Year, Back to School. For a horrible moment just as he woke up, Remus forgot where he was. He took in the stuffy air, the faint whiff of rotten newspaper, body odour and urine. He took in the hard floor, which had exasperated his various aches and pains overnight. Then he opened his eyes and saw Grant lying on the mattress opposite, staring back at him. He looked a bit better. "Morning," Grant mouthed. "Morning," Remus replied, moving against Sirius, who was still fast asleep, head back against the wall. He peeled himself away carefully and whispered to Grant, "Don't worry, he sleeps like the dead. I'll wake him up in a bit." "I can't remember much," Grant whispered, lying on his side, head resting on a pillow which looked dirty and stained. "Sorry if I was a nub. I think I am a bit of a nub these days." "You were fine," Remus shook his head. "Just sad, maybe." Grant looked stricken, so Remus moved to get up. "Lou?" he asked. "Downstairs. I'll show you." Grant pulled himself up, gingerly, then looked amazed. "Blimey," he said, patting his side. "Must have just been a bruise after all. Knew I didn't need no doctor." Remus pursed his lips and followed Grant out. Downstairs was already alive with activity, despite the early hour. The house seemed to be a kind of commune, full of all kinds of different people. There was an outhouse in the back garden, more like a yard that had been turned into an allotment, and an outdoor shower, which Remus couldn't imagine was much fun in the winter. Still, the people were very friendly, and all said hello to the two boys as they passed, which Remus remarked upon. "Everyone seems nice." "They're all right," Grant replied from inside the loo. "Only been here a few days, leaving as soon as I can." "For Brighton? You mentioned that last night." "Oh, did I?" "Yeah, that was the plan." Grant came out of the outhouse, looking sheepish. "Maybe next month, though." "What's there? Friends?" Grant nodded. "Yeah, one of the nicer lads from the Mile End place. Got a cousin there too, the last chapman who don't hate me. She owns a pub, said she'd hire me if I could get my shit together and pay the train fare." He sighed heavily, washing his hands, then face, in a bucket of water taken from a big green water butt standing by the back door. "Supposed to prove myself." That doesn't seem very... What did Remus want to say? Familial? Kind? Grant had clearly experienced very little of either. "Nah, she's fair enough," Grant replied, feeling in his pockets and coming up empty. Remus handed over his own tin of roll-ups and the lighter. Grant nodded appreciatively and continued explaining as he lit up. "I've let her down a few times before, mostly if Grandad was involved. You know I can't stick him." Remus nodded, trying to be understanding. Grant had a huge family, Irish Catholic, he'd said once, but relations between them was often fraught, particularly where his patriarchal grandfather was concerned. "Don't get me wrong," Grant was saying. "I really was going this time, I was. But it just turned out wrong again. Lots turned out wrong, to be honest." Remus wanted to hug him, but he looked so thin, so wiry and prickly, it made him afraid to. "How much is it?" he asked, digging into his pockets. "I've got a bit of money, left by my dad. You can have the fare. I'll take you to the station today." "Couldn't do that." Grant held up his hands. "Not to keep, obviously," Remus said, quickly. "You know me. Look, I've got one more year of school, then I'll come and find you, and you'll have been working in your cousin's pub, right? So you can pay me back. How much? £10? £4, Grant sighed. "I had £4 last week too, but I lost it. I didn't drink it, promise." £4? I can lend you that, that's fine." "Are you serious?" Grant stared at him, blinking. "Of course," Remus nodded, frowning slightly. "Why not? You do the same for me." Grant shook his head, then pressed the heel of his hand into one eye, as if overcome with emotion. "Thanks, Remus. You're such a good mate." "You do the same for me," Remus repeated. It occurred to him for the first time that he and Grant were actually the same age. Grant had always been so knowing, so streetwise and protective, that Remus had considered him older, more mature. But he was only 17, and life had been as cruel to Grant as it had been to Remus. Perhaps even more cruel, because after all, Remus knew in his heart he would never be homeless. He could never be alone while the marauders were there. He needed to learn to stop putting people on pedestals, stop expecting so much of everybody. He stepped forward then, and hugged the other boy, minding not to burn himself on the cigarette. "When'd you get so tall, anyway?" Grant laughed, muffled under Remus's arm. "Don't," Remus chuckled, pulling back. "Sirius teases me all the time." "Sirius?" Grant shook his head in amazement. "Sirius and Remus? Bloody hell! Is it him? The posh lad that broke your heart?" Yeah. It's okay now, though." "I hope so, Remus, mate." There was time for Grant to pack his meagre possessions and for Sirius and Remus to take him for breakfast at a small cafe in Victoria Station. "You're going to make me fat," he said to Remus as he scoffed down his second bacon butty. "No chance," Remus said, prodding him in the ribs. Sirius had been quiet all morning, but then he never did function well on a poor night's sleep. He looked only slightly rumpled, his hair a little less lustrous than usual, his eyes a bit foggy. Remus could tell he was still fascinated by the sights and sounds of Muggle London, only of course he couldn't explain that to Grant. Grant regarded Sirius with a similar wariness. He apologised for his behaviour the night before, and tried to explain that they'd caught him on a bad night. He seemed meeker in front of Sirius, less cheeky, perhaps perceiving him as a social superior, and therefore mildly dangerous. Remus well remembered how alien Potter and Black had been to him, once upon a time. "You two got your own train to catch, eh?" Grant said, eyes flicking to Sirius, then Remus, then back again. "Yeah, but we've got time," Remus said. "Here, I want to give you this." He handed Grant a scrap of paper which had the Potter's address on it. "It's where I'm living when I'm not at school. Will you send me a letter when you settled? A postcard? Promise?" "Yeah, okay," Grant nodded, tucking it away. "Warning you, my handwriting's shit, and I can't spell for toffee. I don't care about that. I just want to know where you are, next time. Do you need stamps? I should have bought stamps." "I can get stamps," Grant touched his arm. "You've done enough, honest." They hugged again on the platform. Grant shook Sirius's hand, which was weird, but polite of him. "I'll come and visit, at Christmas maybe, or next summer," Remus said. "I bloody well believe you, too. Can't get rid of you, can I?" Grant grinned. His first genuine smile so far. It made Remus feel somewhat easier. "Like magnets, you and me, eh? Always snap right back together." This hit Remus in such a way that he had to hug Grant again, until the other boy laughed and pushed him away. All right. I've got a train to catch, you know." And of course, so did Remus and Sirius. As soon as Grant had disappeared through the train doors, they bolted towards the gentlemen's toilets to operate to King's Cross. Inside the cubicle, Sirius finally spoke. He touched Remus's arm, where Grant had only minutes before. "You look exhausted. Let me do it. You can side along." "Really?" Remus could have said that he was no more tired than Sirius, who had put up with just as much as he had, but that would have been a lie. He was too tired to argue even. "Really," Sirius nodded, taking his arm. "Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for helping him." "Don't be silly," Sirius gave him a small smile. He loves you." But Remus had no chance to finish this thought. He was spinning through space, noise and colour blurring as he and Sirius left Victoria and landed, fairly gracefully, just outside King's Cross. They had no choice but to run for the platform, and found James hanging out of the train door waving frantically. "Fucking hell! Where have you two been?" "Language!" Lily's face poked out of the next window along. "You're a red boy now. You should be setting an example." "I am setting an example, telling these wankers off," James retorted, as Sirius and Remus clambered onto the train, just as the guard's whistle blew. "Language!" Lily said again. "Honestly, James, you really need to start growing up this year. You're of age. You need to start acting—" "Isn't she brilliant?" James beamed at Remus, who was now sitting on the floor of the carriage, catching his breath. Sirius was bent over, hands on his knees, looking shockingly unserious, red in the face, hair everywhere. James regarded them both, folding his arms. Gold Dead Boy and Quidditch Captain patches glinted on his dark robes. "So, where were you?" "Told you, gig," Sirius huffed. "Which band?" "You don't know them, Muggle Band." "Why didn't you come back last night? Where did you sleep?" Sirius flashed a nervous look at Remus, and Remus could see he was on the verge of spilling everything. He stood up, quickly. "We didn't sleep. It went on all night. We had breakfast and came straight here." Sirius stared at him in amazement, before nodding along. James shook his head. "Mental! And dangerous. Seriously, lads, don't do that again." "Won't," Sirius murmured, looking at his feet. Lily appeared in the corridor, hands on her hips, looking beautiful and terrifying. "Potter," she said, "we've got to lead the meeting." "Right you are," James grinned, forgetting all about his out-of-breath friends, following the redhead away towards the prefect's carriage. "See you later, boys," he called, absent-mindedly. "You're a really good liar," Sirius said to Remus. Maybe it was the lack of sleep, or the pain in his hip, but this statement rubbed Remus the wrong way. "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped. "Nothing." Sirius looked down again. "Come on, let's find Pete." Peter was sitting with Mary, Marlene and Dorcas in the carriage Lily had just exited. He looked a bit outnumbered, as the girls were swapping tips with fingernail strengthening charms. "We thought you'd missed the train," Marlene said, as Remus and Sirius entered. "You know me, McKinnon," Sirius gave his most charming grin. "Like to make an entrance." "And now you're dragging poor Remus down with you," Mary laughed. "Come and sit here, Lupin. I'll protect you from that delinquent." She budged up in a seat to make room by the window. Remus took the space gratefully. "Where were you?" Peter asked. "You left me alone with Lily and James. I might as well have been a ghost." "Gig. Stayed out late. Didn't sleep." Sirius waved down, yawning. He sat opposite Remus and folded his arms, leaning tiredly against the window. The train began to move, and Remus closed his eyes, because he was exhausted, but also because that way he didn't have to answer any more questions about where he'd been. The girls began to speak more quietly, and he eventually drifted to sleep. When he woke up, they were already in Scotland, the dark rolling hills whooshing past, a smattering rain hitting the windows. Sirius was curled up in the seat opposite him, completely hidden under everyone else's cloaks. Remus could hear him breathing evenly, fast asleep. Mary was just sliding the door open as Remus stretched, waving at her sleepily. She smiled and waved back, but looked serious. Marlene frowned. "What's up?" "I just saw Lily," Mary whispered. "Something happened in the prefect carriage." She glanced over at Sirius, still just a lump underneath the cloaks, and lowered her voice even further, so that Remus and Marlene had to lean in. "James and Regulus got into a fight. They're both okay, but it got quite nasty by the sound of it. Regulus was saying some really crazy stuff. Lily was really shaken." "He's one of them," Marlene whispered, looking anxious. "The Black family are UNO's strongest supporters. Everyone knows it." "Shh," Remus said, quickly. "We don't know that's what it was about. It could be anything." The girls fell quiet after that, but exchanged concerned looks with each other, and Remus could tell that they thought he was being naive. He leaned back and looked out the window for a while, listening to Sirius's relaxed heartbeat, and worrying about Grant, and wishing more than anything that the worst was already behind them.